Okay, we will call the City of Nisswa Tuesday, April 26th council workshop to order. All the council is present and we are here to, well, we'll start off by a review of our strategic plan. Jenny, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. Good evening, members of the council. Nice to see everybody here today. We are going to start our conversations about our strategic plan for 2023. We will touch on 2022 work that was done that we're implementing this year. We will talk about our employee survey results, very high level, but we'll certainly have opportunity if you have questions or want to talk about anything more specifically. And then we will talk about Arpa funding and some ideas that we have provided to you for initial conversation. So I'm going to walk the council through these topics at a high level. I'll probably go at a brisk pace just because I want time for conversation and discussion from the council, but feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions or want to talk about something in more detail. Okay, so for today, I have two goals, hopeful outcomes of the meeting for the council. The first one is council feedback and direction on ARPA funding priorities. This doesn't have to be full, complete. These are all of the, the priorities we want. We still have plenty of time to develop if we want to start with some specific things and then continue that conversation. We can do that, but hopefully get an initial kind of short list that Maggie and I can work towards providing more specific financial information to you at a future meeting. And then the second item is council feedback and direction on our strategic plan priorities and areas of focus for 2023. One of the takeaways from our process last year going through this for the first time was, from a staff perspective, to hear from the council early on about what priorities and goals you might have, so that would help them better develop their budgets. So we'll just at least start the conversation and go from there. So as we talked last year and we created our strategic plan, these were the benefits of it. I'm trying to look, full picture at the community needs. How do we operate our business in an efficient way, maximizing our services and revenues, and really providing that roadmap for the staff especially, but for the council to use as well. And I liked this visual. So we talked about, we have our comprehensive plan that we updated in 2019. We have our budget document that we use. We have two documents, and how do you bring that together to actually create something actionable, which the result was our strategic plan last year. Something that I didn't do last year as I was thinking about this year's process was I didn't create a document for the council, sort of a summary of the results of the work that we did. So as part of the process this year, I will do that. So we will have 3 documents that will hopefully link together, having that strategic plan kind of tie those two items, the other items together. As we know, here are the 5 categories: our long-range infrastructure plan, our policy ordinance synchronization, employee retention satisfaction, operations efficiency, and safety plan. So as a very quick recap by each category for 2022, so our long-range infrastructure plan, we spent a lot of time developing those vehicle matrices, the 10-year capital improvement plan on the vehicle side. And creating funding matrices for most of our departments. That hasn't fully been completed. That work will continue this year, but we made really great strides in that area last year. From a policy and ordinance synchronization component, we established a policy to timely review city ordinances and policies. So hopefully we won't go too many years in the future without having looked at our policies and our ordinances to make sure they're still reflecting the goals that we want as a city. For our employee retention satisfaction plan, we established a compensation study policy. So how frequently we will be reviewing the compensation study for staff, and whether in the future that would include benefits. That was some feedback we received last year as part of that process. We'll look at that in 3 years and develop that again moving forward. Operations efficiency, we evaluated some technology improvements, hopefully to gain efficiencies from staff perspective. One of those items included, if you recall, the WatchGuard software for the police department. Now that's in process and we're still working through implementation. I anticipate more information will come to the council on that, but as an example, that was something to help provide some efficiency for staff and still get their work done. And then with our safety plan, assessing building security was a very high priority, something that really rang true across the board with all departments, and reviewing our citywide safety policy and the training associated. So those things are in process. We will talk about the building security piece as part of the Arpa funding as well a little bit later, but those were at least some of the taking initial steps with our safety plan to see how we can move that forward. So I've had a few conversations with department heads about what the 2023 process looks like here and sort of the additional expectations that we talked about last year. Sort of, we wanted to take a reasonable step forward last year, and now we will continue that work. So as part of that, it was important, as the council may recall, that we engaged all staff. And so full department discussion with the strategic plan goals. So department heads will be scheduling time with their staff to engage them in a discussion. They will document that date. They will provide that feedback that they received from their staff and bring that forward in the budget conversations we will have with them in July. So they're going to go over the 5 categories with them, have conversations, document the feedback, and bring that forward for the council so you have that for reference. And they should also identify which items will be incorporated into their budget, and if not, include why. I mean, it could be that's, a $200,000 expense, not reasonable, moving on type of thing, or if it maybe just doesn't align with the goals for the department over the upcoming year, something like that as well. So they're working on that. I have offered any assistance that they might need. But I expect that to happen over the next couple of months, I would say. Some of the ideas for each category that we've also talked about is sort of how do we take the work we did last year and continue to bring it forward into 2023. So for the long range infrastructure plan, it was to do what we did with the vehicles and apply that to the buildings. We need to take that next step in establishing what the building infrastructure looks like and what we need to start putting away for maintaining our buildings.
Jenny?
Yes.
Are they going to look at like technology matrices also or not?
Yes, I would certainly, depending on the size of the department, they may already do that. If their technology, like say for admin, our technology is minimal. If it's something included within the building community center, they have their audiovisual system, things like that. I would anticipate that Amber would have that in their building matrix for replacement of that type of technology. For our policy and ordinance synchronization, continuing to assess policy coordination between departments so we don't create policies in one area that might cause issues in another, just making sure things flow and work well across departments, and new legislation. So when new legislation is enacted, we should be ensuring that our ordinances and policies are current and that they are appropriate. Employee retention satisfaction. So the idea of creating a 5-year employee retention satisfaction plan came about towards the end of last year, and we've been having conversations about that. The employee survey is one way to start that. So we'll continue to talk about that concept and what does that look like. The employee engagement survey, we completed that. We'll talk about that in a bit. And succession planning. So I tossed the general concept out to department heads. What does your succession planning look like? It may be more on the forefront for some departments than others, but ensuring you have redundancies and things like that even is important for every department to have. Operations efficiency, kind of furthering the technology software program, just continuing to look at that to improve efficiency. Maggie and I have been looking at a software that, you know, from an organizational digital perspective, as opposed to maintaining paper files and things like that. Just lots of options out there. But if we can continue to keep an eye on what might work and is reasonably priced, it's worth considering. Seeking vendors citywide, so we don't have different vendors servicing different things for different departments, is something we're slowly working towards. We're trying to get there, but we'll get there. Everyone kind of does their thing. So how can we, and hopefully, you know, save some money in the process of that as well. And our safety plan, again, building security, our safety policy and training, and emergency planning. So that is something new for this year. I have been working with Chief Taylor and our fire chief, public works director, on our emergency operations plan, getting that updated and ensuring we've got the infrastructure we need and things like that, so we can respond to an emergency depending on the type, efficiently and well. As part of just the ideas that I provided to department heads and staff, I just also sort of broadly mentioned, think of the comprehensive plan when you're looking at these categories. And also, what metrics can we start to track and use as data points to help either show the value and why we're proposing something, or it's just great to see some history and tracking, and every department in some way can track some kind of metric. So kind of toss that broadly out. We'll see where that goes from there. Very high level, just wanted to kind of tee up the strategic plan conversation with the council. Any questions at this point? No? Okay. What I will do is I'm going to move into our employee survey, kind of directly going to strategic plan 3, employee engagement retention. And then we'll kind of pause there and talk about strategic plan in general, specific to anything you might have as well. So. Okay. So what I'm going to do, basically, I'm going to present to you what I presented to staff. It's a condensed version, but you have all the information here, and then we'll talk about if there was anything specific that jumped out at you that either you wanted me to go back and do more research on, or important areas to kind of follow up on, whatever that might be. But I just wanted to provide some high-level information and context to you. So when I met with staff, I first said, thank you. It takes time to complete the survey. That's really important to do, to have that input to hopefully help, achieve our goals. So that was really important to recognize staff's participation in that. Our meeting was for me to share the data with them, discuss responses, ask any follow-up questions that may come from that, and hear any input that staff might have. Let me think. I will just go back. They hadn't seen the information before I presented it, so there wasn't a lot of back and forth at the meeting, but I did articulate, hopefully well, that hopefully they'll take this information and talk about it at their department meetings, at least as a starting point to building upon the conversation. So goals of the survey itself. To advance our strategic plan, the employee retention and satisfaction. And then again, to say part of this discussion with department heads and staff going forward. So having information to help facilitate that conversation. It was just to establish some baseline data. We just had to start somewhere and say, where are we feeling and where's this organization at as of this point in time? hopefully will allow us to engage in thoughtful discussion across all levels of the organization and create a way to have that continuous feedback loop. So as an overview for the survey itself, so there were 42 respondents. Of the full-time staff, 78%, that reflected 78% of the full-time staff responded. 37% of our part-time, fire, seasonal staff, either lumped everyone into full-time or part-time. And so 37%, so 42% overall. All the survey results have been provided with 2 exceptions. I removed the date time stamp from there, just ensuring that it was wanted to be anonymous. I just wanted to keep it that way. So I took that off. And then there were 3 specific names mentioned in comments that I removed. I don't think that took away from the comment itself. Everything should have been clear, but I just thought it didn't need to be in there. I did not participate in the survey. And again, these are just broad results and at least gives us something to start with and to work off of for creating future priorities. Something I thought of as I was reviewing the results for the first time was, how do we trend with other organizations? So I did a little bit of searching on the internet, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually completed a study that used December 2021 data. So very recent. It was published in March. So I probably found this link a week after it was published. So that worked out well. And for state and local employees, and this is nationwide, the split between salary and benefits, 62% salary, 38% benefits. So I was kind of curious, how do we compare? Question? Not yet? Okay. So I was curious. So I just picked 5 employee grades, kind of low, middle, higher, and said, how do we compare? I included the our family health insurance contribution in that number, and the study actually listed the items that they used to include in that benefit number. So I used the same items that we had. And grade 5 is a little bit off from that, being close to that national information, that national data. But grade 11 and 17 are pretty much spot on with that. So for what it's worth, we're not probably intentionally tracking that way, but we are in alignment with that. I'm guessing grade 5, if you get lower on the salary scale, that's just the balance between the benefits and the salary is going to be a little bit have that impact. But I thought it was an interesting data point, and I just wanted to provide that. If we decide that we want to do more research or dig into some of that in the future, we certainly can as well. Okay, I'm going to highlight just a handful of some of the questions for you, and just to provide some information, and certainly stop me if you have questions. I'm not going to go through more than a handful, but I thought it was helpful information to have. So the 4th question on the survey was, how familiar are you with the terms of each benefit plan? And 44% said they are somewhat familiar. Typically, you become more familiar when you have a need or reason to use your healthcare, because something happens. But that's something certainly we can work on. How do we increase that level of familiarity? What information do we need to provide? Things like that. So that is just something good to reflect on. Mark?
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you ever have a benefit seminar with the employees?
Well, we have a meeting with our insurance agent during the renewal every year. And I mean, he's always available, but we don't really have that, conversation as a group more than once a year. And so do we need to do something like that more often? Do we need to have more have more materials? What would be helpful, if anything?
Yeah, because that kind of grabbed my attention when I was going through it. So I don't know if that can be done by department heads or how, but just more explanation maybe. Right. So hopefully as part of these conversations, it's like, well, how can we help you feel more familiar with your benefit plans? So we'll work through that. Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that there on that particular question, only 18 answered, 24 skipped.
Mm-hmm.
So is that because they're the others are not don't get benefits?
Correct. Yes. So 18 full-time staff completed that.
Okay.
So yes, yeah, the rest were part-time. Yep. Question number 5, how do the city's current health plans meet your expectations? So 44% answered somewhat meets your expectations or does not meet your expectation. And so kind of the follow-up question, hopefully we'll work through is why? What is your expectation? Is it a cost component? Is it a plan coverage, a deductible? You know, why did you answer the way you did, or what context can you provide? So. Question number 10, flip to that one. Which current benefit plans are the most important to you? Health insurance, dental insurance, and vacation and sick leave were the highest, received the highest responses. And so if there's follow-up on that, but at least it gives you context for when we're looking at benefits, you know, which ones are highly important to staff, things like that. Question 11, which new benefit options would you like to see incorporated into the city's compensation package? So they had to rank these items, most important to least important. So most important was employer contribution to deferred comp. And I don't know that we've really talked about that much in my time here. So that was a really interesting response. And I think that's worth looking into for, I mean, it all is, but I thought that was really, really interesting. Longevity pay, flexible scheduling, and early retirement. I highlighted flexible scheduling and early retirement incentive because they were so close in the responses and essentially tied for third, so to speak. So those were the highest ranking items as far as, you know, potential new benefits to consider at some point. Question 13, please rank the following compensation categories in the order of importance to you. So 83% of staff said salary and wage component is most important, and then followed by benefit plans, your health, your dental, life insurance, things like that. And the reason, well, it's important, I think, to ask this question to gauge, typically in our budget process, we start with salary and we work through steps and cost of living and all that stuff. But let's say those responses were reversed, then we're probably not looking at the budget process the right way. So the fact that the salary and wage is the most important by far says, I think we're starting off the right way. It also ties in my mind to that comparison with the national trend information to say, well, we're tracking with that. It seems like we're meeting that objective with staff, that salaries is the most important. So we start there. But if that were to change, then we should be mindful of that to see if that's something that we wanted to look at further. Jumping ahead a little bit to question 18, do you see yourself working for the city in 2 years? 65% answered yes. And I felt really positive about that as we're hearing about the great resignation these days and a lot of changes coming out of the pandemic. 65% is a strong response, and not sure, being 32% is okay. That could be for a number of reasons. If there are reasons reflective of what the organization is doing or how they're doing it, that's certainly worth a conversation during the department meetings and during our budget process and things like that. But it could also just be like a career change, which happens as well. So something that if there's opportunity to improve, I hope we hear about it and we can talk through that a little bit. Question 19 was a general feedback question. So it was just a blank text box for staff to include some feedback. And it was, if one thing in your job could be improved or changed, what would it be? And the two themes that were my takeaways from the answers included communication and consistency. What I shared with staff when I read through the comments was hopefully we can continue to work through that because as you can see, sometimes the response was just one word, communication. Well, what does that mean? to you, right? It can mean something different to everybody. And so understanding what that looks like a bit more will be really helpful for your own department, for me, for the city council. It could be city council communication. Okay, what does that look like and how can we improve that? So hopefully there will be additional conversation and feedback around that. Consistency, same thing, depending on, because this was a citywide survey, it could be one department versus another versus me versus I mean, it could be a number of things. So how do we improve consistency and what does that look like? We talked a little bit about our strategic plan and creating that feedback loop, as I mentioned. And so the importance of department heads engaging staff in these conversations. And hopefully staff can provide specifics and details when they're able to help provide context again. Question 20. I feel confident in my career path and how my position contributes to the success of the city. 70% said that they strongly agreed, which I thought was great. That was a really great response to know that a majority of staff, when they come to work, they understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, how it helps the city overall with our help to the community. So I thought that was a really great positive response. Question 23 was to rank the level of positivity within your department. We landed at a 7, which is great. We have room to grow, and hopefully through this process, we can have more tangible ideas and suggestions for how to do that. The level of positivity citywide was a little bit lower, 6 in some change. If there's information to help kind of describe why the difference would be great to know. So we'll see if we can get any more information from that. Question 30.
Has anyone provided you anything since the survey?
No.
Essentially, okay.
No, I did kind of tee it up as far as
Right.
go talk with your departments and, and start there and let's start to do that. But
Okay.
yeah, I think in this too, I think this meeting is, part of that kickoff as well. Question 30, my supervisor provides useful and constructive feedback to me on a regular basis. I mentioned this one because at first glance, I thought, oh, this is great. I agree and strongly agree. And as I looked at it a little bit more, I said, wow, but 43% is still a big number as far as neutral, meaning I'm not quite sure how to answer probably, or disagree or strongly disagree. So I think collectively, for anyone who supervises staff, we should reflect on that and see if there are ways to improve that. I certainly will do that as well. Communication, question 33, which methods are most helpful? So email updates was noted as the highest response, department meetings and watching city council meetings. As I mentioned at our meeting last week, we do have a lot of YouTube activity. So there are likely staff, community members, of course, that are watching our meetings, whether live or recorded, which is great. So that's a great new tool that we have. But just I think for myself, for the council department heads, what methods are most effective to getting information out. I have tried to increase my sharing of information, especially from a council perspective with staff. And I've added to whomever wants it on our part-time staff list. If they want to receive my emails as well, they are now included in that. So if I have council updates, that they can get that information if they'd like. So it's a little thing, but if it's of interest, I think that's great to share the information. Question 34 was asking if staff would you participate in an employee committee that would help guide future recommendations, including benefits, wellness, retention, staff gatherings, etc. 69% said yes. I expected a strong positive response in that way. And so I have some information for you if you want to talk about that a little bit more detail. We can talk about some initial thoughts I have on an employee engagement committee. But there was a strong response for that to happen. And would you recommend Nisswa as being a great place to work? A little over 7, ranking of 7 there, which I think is good. And hopefully we'll continue to improve that number going forward. So that was my very high level overview of the survey. I wanted to touch on some of the items that I think will be more relevant topics of conversation throughout our budget process and our strategic plan process. Any comments, questions, feedback on the survey?
Yeah, I had just one question about the, on the constructive feedback questions. We wouldn't need to know that here, but is there more detail as far as by department that you have feedback on that? Or is this way you, is this information the same as what we're seeing here?
Yes, this is exactly what I have. So I don't have, they weren't asked what department are you in or anything like that. This was just meant to be hopefully a very safe way to provide some feedbacks, because when you're a finance department of one,
Yeah, right.
that might be a little awkward if you have that feedback. So not that there's maybe ways we can do that in the future, but hope you don't mind I use yours as an example. Like, I just didn't want anyone to feel pretty obvious, or if there's 2 people in an apartment, you're like, well, let's see 1 or 2. So, but yes, if from a council perspective, I did also share this with staff, but from a council perspective, if there's additional information you'd like to see next year, I mean, by all means, we want to make sure this is as helpful and productive for everybody. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
About the employee committee, how many would you envision to be on that? And how are you going to spread that out so it's representative?
Yep. Would you like me to share my initial thoughts on that?
Please.
Okay. So I've done a bit of internet research on this because I haven't been a part of an employee committee before. I haven't gone through that process. So I thought, well, we should try to figure out what kind of generally accepted parameters there might be. So I think one of the goals in establishing a committee potentially would be to for the council to support and promote employee engagement in order to advance our citywide goals, really advance our strategic plan. So what I would suggest in some form for you to think about, and I can provide this to you if you'd like me to email it to you so you can kind of review it and think about it. So we definitely want a cross-section of employees, right? We want a representative group. Somewhere in the 5 to 6 range, I think would be a good number. For reference, we have 24 full-time staff, including me. So that gives you a reference. That's why I say 20 to 25% of our full-time staff. I would say no more than 2 from one department, no more than 2 department heads. No, me, of course. This would be a peer group that would make up, a cross section of staff from different departments. So what?
Yeah, I was just curious. You said 24 full-time staff, but
Yep.
we only have 18 that responded to the insurance question. So does 6 of them, 6 do not have the insurance? They elected not to have it? Or?
So take myself out of that. So there's 23, 5 people, full-time staff did not do the survey. That's
okay.
That's why we only have 18 respondents.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I've read, this is mostly from this is how you would create this committee, is the council would say, okay, who's interested? You would submit a letter of interest for why you want to be on the committee. That would be reviewed by the personnel committee, and the personnel committee would select a group to make sure there's a good representation across departments to the best you can have. And that this would be my suggestion, having a 2-year term. Establishing the committee, you might do half 1-year term, half 2-year term or something to create that rotating amount so we don't have the whole committee turning over in 2 years. And then the committee would self-appoint a chair and a secretary. The chair would be the person to present to the council, so their voice would be representative in the council, at council meetings or wherever appropriate as we go through this. The secretary would keep meetings record just so that that could be handed over throughout, the next however long this is established, so that history is retained. The committee would propose areas of focus for that upcoming year and present to the personnel committee for approval. So we are all on the same page. So if the committee says we think these are the top 2 priorities for staff for the next year, and we'd like to research, we'd like to work on creating a proposal for that, the personnel committee can say, yes, we think that's in alignment with the city's goals. And so then we all know what's happening. And I think the policy would probably need to outline the amount of time we would, I think obviously give staff time during the day to work on this, but it's sort of, what does that time element look like? And is there a component of, you may have to work on this on your own time? I'm not really sure. I'm sort of just sharing my ideas with you, but I can imagine some of these topics will take a lot of time and effort to research. And so what's that balance? I don't really know that yet, but certainly open to ideas for that. And Mark, maybe you have experience in this. But we'd want to outline that, so we have an expectation and a structure for that as well. So that's a high level overview of what that would look like. If the council, as a part of our strategic plan, finds that to be valuable, I would envision that, well, depending on how fast you'd want to move on that, we can either work through that this summer to have something in place for next year. I don't know how much we would be able to incorporate into the 2023 budget, but that's certainly flexible as far as I'm concerned.
One thing I've found in committees like this. In committees like this, people will say, gee, that's a great idea. Let's get together and talk about what we can do differently and whatever. You go in with high hopes and you come up with a plan, and everybody thinks it's a great plan on the committee. And you present to the boss or the council or whatever. And by golly, it's not accepted the way you envisioned it to be. Management makes changes or doesn't do anything about the report, and then everything goes downhill real quick. It could be a negative rather than a positive. And I would wonder, maybe it's a little early, but how would you assure the committee that management is thinking about you and about what you're presenting, so they don't get discouraged if their proposals aren't taken?
Great question. Yes, yes. Part of that goes back to we want to be on the same page on the front end for the types of areas they want to focus on looking at. It might also be where the council may need to say, we would allow X amount of dollars to go towards something, so they know if we can create something within a certain set of parameters, that unless there is some really odd scenario, it's basically going to be accepted if we all agree on the front end. Yes, I would certainly hate to see a lot of time and effort put into something that ultimately isn't supported. So how do you create those expectations in the beginning?
Would you envision on these committees that there be a council rep be on each one? Not to steer the committee in any certain way, but to give the wisdom of the council when you get into certain issues? Or is that going to be a negative, having a council member?
We certainly could get feedback from staff on that. My perspective is to let them do their work without influence of me or the council, because that just, there's an element there, whether you really want it to be or not. I think for them to have the freedom to have a conversation within that group, to work through issues, to talk through things, I think is important. So I'm not opposed to that, but I would want staff to think that's a good idea, I guess is how I would say that.
I think one of the things that it's all about expectation management. You know, how do you set this up in the first place? You can try to shoot for stars, or you can shoot for more practical things too. But it's a matter, it depends on the people on the committee, as well as the city administrator and us, for expectations. You know, doesn't mean that we're going to give everything that you say, you know, but without that communication, there's no hope to make change anyway. So communication is the most important thing. That's more the goal of this, I believe, that we need to hear from the committee or from the council side what people really are thinking down there. And I don't think there's a real chance to do that right now, unless they come individually and bring this up at a city council meeting, which could be very intimidating. So I think this is sort of a nice start anyway, but like you say, if they bring up a whole bunch of stuff and it's not realistic even, you know, and then it doesn't go through, then they go, oh, that was no good. Well, it's all a matter of looking at this from a expectation management. You can't expect that your salary is going to go up 10% because they say so every year, you know, something like that. But there are issues that should be brought up to us, and then we should consider that very seriously.
I'll echo what you said. I mean, one of the biggest problems I have is from a management perspective is if we could sit in this room with all of the employees and just have a discussion, just to talk. Okay, what are we thinking? But we can't do that without it being an open meeting. Unless it's very specific issues where you can close a meeting for employee things, but you can't. And that what hampers us, because you can't hear from the employees what they're thinking that. And then the employees at the same time say, okay, then the council can say, okay, but how do you afford that? And we had that with another group here not too many months ago. What's that actual cost? And so with an employee committee, they can sit there as their group without any of us around, and they can explore that and hopefully, like you said, when you understand everything has a cost associated to it, or there's, it can't all happen overnight. And I think that's the biggest problem. I've been a part of an employee committee in Hibbing involving health insurance. And it was hard. I got to say, it was a lot harder. In that particular case, I think is you had multiple union groups, all had different ideas on how we should do things. And the end result there was, I think we lost a really good opportunity to do something really positive, not just for employees, but for the city. But that was a different ballgame. Here, I think if the employees can get together and do that, and they're willing to do that and look at it from both sides. Because the council's trying, I mean, I'm trying to look at it from both sides. But I mean, I think to have one of us sit in, unless there was a specific reason why they wanted somebody there, but.
So since we're on the topic, any initial thoughts on, would you like to see further work on creating like an actual policy draft for you? Do you think this is worthy of number 3, employee retention engagement? It may be too soon to ask, but since we're talking about it, I figured I might as well ask and see what you think.
I think we should.
Oh, go ahead.
I do as well.
I think we should, but It's kind of funny. We draft the policy for the employee committee.
Mhm.
Can we
I-
get the employees involved in drafting it?
Well, of course, I mean,
yeah,
we can
okay,
open it
yeah,
up to, here's, I mean, you gotta start with something, right? So
Yes.
it's supposed to,
an
here it
outline.
is, and then give me your feedback. Maybe somebody will find something, on Google better than I did and say, oh, well, look at this. I mean, again, this was just I have no clue where to start, and I wanted to try to put something together. I think generally it's decent, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want it to work for everybody.
Well, you have one committee the first year, right? One committee,
Mhm.
Yes,
right? It seems to me the first meeting you would sit down with the committee and say, here's what we believe you should be doing. It's up to you how you do it, or you can do other things you want, but here's the overall goal of why we set the committee up. So they have some end time at the end of the year. They know they've done their job or not. I would prefer to have them do a little more free form.
yeah. Oh, right, to improve employee satisfaction, retention, all of those things would be, the very broad summary of that. But yes, then allowing them to take whatever direction, obviously within what's reasonable and appropriate for the work we do. But yes, I think that would be fair to then allow them to brainstorm and to
Mhm.
see where they want to go with that.
I do think too that, setting, some kind of a reasonable expectation for times, like how much time during the day to meet. But there's gonna have to be a lot of flexibility there when it first gets going, because
Sure.
it's gonna be, I mean, and then certain topics, you said it, certain topics are gonna take a lot longer. So.
Yeah.
I think we can be flexible there. Me personally.
Well, certainly. And it may just come down to if we're able to focus on an area, or two to start things off, then at least we're not thinking of 10 things, for example, or thinking about one or two things that would help that
Right.
time element as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I will work on that. I will send a draft to everyone, basically with these parameters but I, add some verbiage on the strategic plan and the goals and the purpose of why we're doing that. And then we'll give some time for feedback, as we'll have some room between now and our next workshop. It hasn't been set yet. So then hopefully we have something good to work off of for that workshop conversation about moving this piece forward.
Does any other governmental entity around the area have anything like this that you're aware of?
It's a great question. Not that I know of, but there are ways to ask that question to see if somebody else is doing it, so we could see what they do.
Well, I know in the military, they used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have like retention committees made up of various ranks.
Yeah, definitely.
Also too, is, say they come with a list of 4 things, this is where we want to see, these are the areas, but I think also they should prioritize them also. One, what's the most important and down, kind of like the department heads do at their budgets.
Yes. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to, as we kind of hopefully wrap, hold on. Did I turn this on? No, I didn't turn it on. I'm just trying to go backwards. Kiki's helping me with that. Just wanted to kind of circle back on if there are any other strategic plan priorities or anything you had feedback for me on today. Just wanted to offer that. Got it. Thank you.
I know I'll have some follow-up questions probably as I go through it more and more and more.
Okay. Oh, I went too far.
Did you want some ideas that weren't on the stuff that you gave out, the things we should be looking at?
ARPA funding or strategic plan?
Strategic plan.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, there was one that we talked about the possibility of citywide sound system. I don't think we should let that go. Uh, There are things about the broadband cell service, some dead spots in town. We could work on, see what we can do there. And there's a planned road behind Wendy's, what is it, 13 to Hazelwood? Or is that
77 to Lower Roy Lake.
Yes, the backage road.
Yeah, that one, that's gonna mean a lot of new business if that goes through. We should be working on that. One thing that impressed me when I moved up here, and I've said it a couple times, but it's kind of bounced off the wall. We're creating a schizophrenic city with our planning down by Wendy's and Schaefer's, and that's where all the new businesses are going down there. Up here, we have the old, I'll call it the old city. It's the tourist city. And I'm just wondering, not right now, but in a couple of years, that split is, we're going to be scratching our heads saying, what should we do about the split? Do we just shut down any building, any new businesses south of here and move everything up here? How do we plan for that? Because there are more businesses going in down by Schaefer's than any place else, and with some other things. I don't think we've looked at that close enough. If I was a tourist person, I was coming up here and I saw the sign that says Nisswa, and I drove up around the corner up here and it says Nisswa, which is a city. There's two Nisswas. I don't know. I think we should be looking at possibility of a new liquor store someplace and plan for that.
Meaning, can I ask, meaning spirits, pickle, both?
Possibly. Is there any reason why you need to not separate?
Okay,
If you
so
had one building-
potentially looking at
one
both.
building with two city services in it. That's a good 3 to 5 years out there, but that takes a while. And then another one, which I'll get shot for, okay? How about if we talk about annexation of some surrounding cities and grow the city?
I've questioned that one myself. That would be a hard pill to swallow, but yes. But
It goes to the point that you want to always be a small city, just like you are right now, with the lakes and the trees. That's why people come up here. Or do you want to change? Like, I don't know, does Nisswa and Lakeshore need to talk about? That could be one. Some townships around, are there any advantages to us and to them? I don't know.
I can see an immediate concession that perhaps they would ask if we are to forfeit us as being municipal, what are you going to give us? Would it be more territories past Lakeshore over into 371 corridor perhaps? That corridor exactly where we have many businesses going into, taxable revenue from businesses, et cetera. Annexation is interesting, but
It could be a friendly annexation,
yeah.
only if there are advantages to both sides.
Mhm.
And that's a big up issue.
I doubt you'll find a situation like Sibley Township where they approached Pequot and wanted to be annexed. That doesn't happen.
That was for a different reason. So.
Exactly, because they didn't want to get swallowed up by Jenkins. So, and other, but, okay.
But thank you for your list. No, I appreciate that. Definitely some short-term items and definitely some long-term items, but that's a good balance to have there. So we will look at these further. Any other feedback or comments today? Anything you would like me to work on? Mark?
Yeah, I'm thinking that it's sort of alluding a little bit to what Don was bringing up, but the city of Nisswa has a set amount of area.
Yep.
There's only a set amount of areas where business can expand and or property, houses can expand to. And I'm thinking the long-term plan. Now, I liked what you brought up about the long-term plan for what you brought up here today, that long-range infrastructure plan. At least we're looking at the buildings, matrix, those types of things.
Yep.
But in addition to that, I was thinking we'd want to think about if we're going to have a long-term plan for expansion, whether it be at the old Smiley Road, or whether it be, and I never thought of annexing a friendly annexation of another area. But if we were just looking at Nisswa only, you'd want to have an infrastructure and maybe look at land acquisitions at this point, if for long range term, because how can we handle the infrastructure if we expand to those areas? And what do we need to have in hand and be ready for it, and have like a matrix for purchasing of properties? That what is it today to buy if we're certain areas, if we want to get it, what will it be 5 years from now as a guess, best faith guess, and what this might help us to be prepared for when opportunities do come up, that we won't just ignore them, and because we're not ready for it. And I think we need to, and there's several examples that I've heard of in the past. So it'd be better to be prepared, knowing how we may want to expand in the future. And if we do in that, like Schaefer's expansion, and then the other expansions, how are we going to handle that infrastructure, and what properties would we need to be able to handle that, and not wait until it's too late and it's already filled in. So I think that's a very important one for long-term master plan planning.
Okay.
I'd like to see more of that.
There's one particular space in the city that would be advantageous to look at, and that's the old airport. If you could do that in a master plan instead of a company coming in and taking a 1 acre pieces here, 2 acres here, and
Exactly.
you do it.
I've heard other recommendations from various people, about, where do we want to keep our fire department? Where do we want to put the pickle and spirits? Should we combine them, maybe put them into a new building? I know that, for example, spirits is old. And
The pickle.
or pickle, sorry.
Yeah.
And it built like in 71 or something, and it's just getting run down. And for operational efficiencies as well, how do you handle that? And so maybe to combine them, get certain properties. I've heard we should have gotten certain other properties possibly in the past, and we didn't because we weren't really ready for it or couldn't do it. But those are the issues that we should really look at, because we do have a fixed amount of space in Nisswa.
Half of it's water.
Exactly.
There you go.
Right. So assuming that will go forward, and it will someday, do we want to get that ready now in place versus wait until 20 years when it's coming in and maybe we can't get properties that we needed to? But there's a lot of opinions on that. I think I would like to learn more about that myself. And that's where the communication comes, and that's where the long-term planning comes. And I would like to hear that more from staff as well as from the community, what to do. I think it's
Ross Krautkramer and I, when Ross was on the council, we had a meeting back in 2018 with a number of people from around the community. Jenny has the notes on it. I have my copies here. And it was exactly that, what has to happen. In a lot of municipalities, especially larger municipalities, a local contractor or developer brought this up to myself and said, well, that community buys and builds and puts in all the infrastructure And then as people build against it or build up to it, they pay their part of it. Great idea. That's not financially something that we really have in our works that we can do. And there's also, I mean, the one thing Ross and I always said to each other was the development is going to happen, period. It will happen.
How it's gonna happen.
Whether anyone wants it to or not, it's gonna happen. But back to the plan then. We need to, we need to have some control over how and where it happens so that it's not, we don't end up like we have behind the Lutheran church, or we have a housing development, we have the church, and now we got to figure out how do we get a road back there, because we got to go behind Schaefer's because the state and the county are going to shut down our intersection on Smiley at their whim. So yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. And I think people know it's not going to be the small little burg it used to be. And it's not going to be, but we only have one real area for development left, and that's down there. Unless we redo a lot of zoning, which, is it popular? Well, yeah, it's only popular if you want it to be that way. So I think that how we do it, I mean, I just don't know how how do you go about affording to put the infrastructure in? I do think we did one good step forward, and that was when the road, Tom just redid the road standard. So everything's got to be a certain same standard, so it meets our standard, period. And that will dictate at planning and zoning, when people come forward to develop a piece of property, we have a little bit of pull saying, okay, yeah, that's fine. However, you will have X amount of room for this road. But to your point, an acre here, an acre there. Yeah, that's how we got in this mess in the first place.
Change is hard.
And
It is.
It seems to me like if we make a plan like that, it would be, there are ways to handle those types of expansion because we know what's coming up. And one idea I've heard, and I'm sure there's a lot more ideas that I haven't heard, and that's why I want to learn more about this. But one is that, you retain certain right of ways when land is purchased. That doesn't cost us anything. It's just the developers will have to do, is my understanding. So always retain certain right of ways, knowing that this is how it's going to develop, because we only have like that one large area. Well, not large, but it's an area that we have. So how can we develop that? And then in order to develop that, what properties would we have to purchase, and where we could just do it without money, just have the right of ways when somebody develops it. So things like that. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat.
Certainly, yeah.
And how can we help developers?
Correct.
Where do we find the cat?
Yeah. Where do you find that cat? That's the trick. Yeah.
Any other feedback on strategic plan? Otherwise, you have a sense of where we're going with it from a staff perspective. I have your notes. We'll circle back.
Somebody watching this will shoot me, but we do still have city water down on the southern, that's kind of still part of in the plan, right?
The city water.
What do you,
City
like
water.
pursuing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
One other thing I was just thinking of was the operation efficiency plan. Part of that also could be location of buildings. You have a lot of good ideas with what we have right now, but part of that future plan, maybe we want to have Spirits and Pickle put together, make it more efficient.
Sure.
That's efficiencies of operation as well.
Yep.
Police department might need to be moved somewhere else. The fire department, I don't know.
Sure. Yep.
But this
Yeah.
is all brainstorming, but that's part of the efficiency plan as well.
Yeah. And especially when we talk about building needs over the next 10, 15, 20 years,
Yes.
depending on what that looks like, might push that conversation more rapidly than others. So
Right.
very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate your feedback. We will move to our ARPA funding
Yep.
topic.
Could you bring me up to speed? What is the criteria that you have to spend the money on? What are the limits?
The criteria, basically what options do we have?
Yeah,
We can spend it on whatever we want,
no restriction.
no restriction. I mean, within what services are we providing now? And if that goes in line with that, I can't, say there are no restrictions because, we can't do some things, but yes, if it's within the parameters of our current operations, there's no department restriction or anything like that. So what I have is, and you've seen this as well. I provided an updated document to you this evening. There's a couple of items that I updated in blue. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, the blue. I'll have to highlight it next time. But as a recap, so our ARPA funding, so as of mid-April, we have $114,528. We should receive our second round of funding. I think it's in May. I think that's when we got the first one. So next month, coming up quick, we should have the bulk of everything else. So we will have $229,056 to spend in total. We have to obligate our funds by December 31st, 2024. And we have to spend the funds by December 31st, 2026. So we certainly have some lead time on this, but if there are projects and priorities that we want to start to move on sooner than later, I think that the timing is really great for that. So the list I have in front of you, I listed the items in the order that I received them from staff. And I can, Mr. Mayor, how would you like me to do this? I can do a quick run through of them. I can highlight the updates that I made for this just today. Or you can just tell me what you like.
We have 2 years to decide.
Yes, you have 2 years to decide.
I'm sure that some opportunities will arise within the 2-year time period.
Very
Sure
likely,
they will
yes.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you just start at the top?
Okay. It's not a long list and
Just so we're all on the same page, then
sure, that sounds great.
you may even answer questions before you get asked them.
So the first item, our city hall security system. As part of, WIDSETH did a very high level overview of the feasibility study for our city hall future improvements. And as part of that process, they helped us obtain 2 quotes for a security system for our building. So I include 40,000 as a line item. The 2 quotes came in between 40 and 50. And we will continue to talk about that as that was a big priority from a staff perspective last year with our strategic plan. So that's certainly something that would advance our safety plan and our strategic goals, part of that. Something potentially to consider that I don't have reflected on the spreadsheet is if you thought this topic was worthy of further review, do we keep this contained within City Hall or do we expand it to other city buildings and do a more complete build out of a security system citywide with these funds? So just a suggestion and an idea to consider. The next item, City Hall building improvements and updates. You just heard the preliminary report. You don't have numbers yet. I will get those to you. So I said to be determined. Likely those improvements, not that we couldn't piece a few things out, but those improvements are going to spend this money many times over. So probably not what you want to use these funds on, but I can provide that to you. And if you want to look at that further, we can certainly talk about that. Camp Lincoln bathroom. So we have $25,000 listed here. That was required by the county when they conveyed the land to the city. And We are supposed to do that within 4 years, so that would be the end of 2024. The cost about a year ago was $25,000. It's a drop-in thing already kind of pre-manufactured, so it's probably a little more expensive, but that's close to that one. Swing set at our playground, $10,000. I asked Amber what the remaining useful life was of that, and she said approximately 2 to 5 years. Playground at our city park, $100,000. Remaining life, approximately 5 years. Infield expansion of our ball field, roughly $5,000 cost to that. Amber did receive a grant for approximately half of that, and that is moving. We will do that this year. We can work within our budget to get that one done. So I didn't cross anything off, but I think that one's taken care of. Park master plan design. We received 2 proposals yesterday. Those will go to the Parks Commission for review. I put a placeholder of 40,000, so that gives you a range of where those landed. So that is certainly something to consider as far as, helping to advance long-term planning for parks specifically, a need that they have. Rink update specific, if there's a specific piece to that to be determined, I would anticipate if the city does approve one firm to complete the master plan, then more of that would follow suit in the coming year or so. Fire hall, technology and media, I don't have an estimated cost. I don't anticipate that at least some quality improvements, could be made with probably funds we have, but I don't think that would be a substantial cost to that one. City Hall generator, possibly sharing with the pickle. We've talked about that off and on in my time here, and I know Tom's talked about that probably in his tenure here at the city as well. So roughly 80,000 for that generator, and it's due to what we would need to have that generator be able to service the pickle and keep that operation running if we lost power, if we were to jointly do one between the two. Defibrillators in city buildings. Don't know a cost for that, but I would anticipate there may be safety grants out there for something like that, which we could still pursue that. I kind of assumed that we had those in all of our buildings, but I don't think we do. That item came from Brian at Spirits, so that must mean we don't have one at Spirits. Broadband and cell service booster. So Don, your item is very timely. The county did broadband. They dove into broadband as part of their ARPA funding, looking at priorities. And I talked with Tim Hool, the county administrator, yesterday. The report that the county received identified 13 areas within the county that were deficient in broadband service. None of them included areas within the city of Nisswa, with the exception of one that the majority of it is in Lake Edward Township. And there's a little bit of spillover on County Road 18 into our border, not far. He provided that info to me yesterday, and that project will actually be happening. So they've kind of taken care of that piece of it. That's not to say that there aren't more needs, but I would anticipate that it might be a cell service issue. That's more of the challenge for some of our areas within our city than broadband.
I think it's more of a repeater to be installed that picks up the signal and rebroadcasts it. But
that one would certainly take time to figure out who to engage and conversations to work through that, but that's certainly something we can do. Pickleball, basketball, tennis court upgrade, 20,000 estimated cost per court. That also may be reflected in a Parks Master Plan document if that's something we want to incorporate into our park system. Police, fire vehicles. The next handful, lost revenue for a community center or a liquor fund. Worker retention incentives, matching grant dollars. So if we were to apply for grants, we could use this money to be the city match contribution for grant money received. and police department defensive tactics training materials. So this would include mats and a red man suit or suits, approximately $6,800. I spoke with Chief Taylor yesterday, and he is working with our fire department to request a donation from the Lions Club for this. So I believe this one should be taken care of, but Craig is working with Sean on that item, which is great. So that one potentially will come off the list. So that is the list in a nutshell. Certainly would entertain additions to the list, or really I'm just looking to see if there are things you would like staff to pursue to spend some of this money this year, or make a plan to start to do that. Just want to make sure we're on the same page for how fast we're moving with this.
I'll just throw out one idea, and that would be to get a library in town. I know we have the elementary school over there, but it's not really a library. It's kids' books and stuff, but if you want to go to the library from here, you have to go all the way to downtown Brainerd to get anything. It'd be nice to have a library.
That's a big project, Don.
Yeah.
Okay,
There is a
Thank
library in Pequot too.
It's going the wrong direction.
I was just gonna say, category, or item 3 through 6, 8 and 13. We really can't look at those yet until the park master plan design is in. And I would like to see that funded, but that's just my druthers. And then the other would be the worker retention incentives. If I'm gonna go where I'm sitting at, those are the two areas I'm sitting at. Park master plan and then the worker retention incentives.
okay. So those are your priorities.
Mhm.
Got it, thank you. Just want to make sure.
Are donations possible within the parameters of this funding? No. Only thing that came to mind was the food shelf donation,
Sure. Well.
perhaps to make it push through a little bit sooner,
Note.
maybe worth looking into.
Okay,
At
yep.
least we can say that we gave an
Mhm.
honest attempt to say that
Yeah. good
maybe
idea.
this could be the fastest opportunity for us to get them some funding that they requested, which I believe was 5K.
Yes,
Right, okay.
5,000. And yes, because when I did follow up on that, there were specific areas that the city could donate to. Food shelves was one of them. So that should be eligible, but we'll verify that to make sure.
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
Or even a portion.
I'm good.
I'm kind of leaning on, I would like to see us pursue the city hall security systems, but expanding that to the
Mhm.
buildings in general. The fire hall, for example. We're looking at a fobbing system.
Mhm.
Do we need some kind of security cameras or anything like that? Those kinds of things. And I don't, I'm not worried about staff. So it's not like working at the convenience store where the security cameras are set up to watch me as the clerk. I'm looking at, people coming and going.
Building perimeter and access. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
See what the
roads in
police
and out, yep.
department, what do the police officer, what do the police department think? That kind of stuff. Security, the security stuff, we've had some interesting encounters the last few years, at times, but, that, and then the, having been more involved with the fire department now, my TV at home is more advanced than what they got. And it isn't. So, they do need they do need that. And I know we've talked with them. It's not out of their own possibility that it's already in their budget. They could probably do some of the stuff they need to do. But, the fire hall currently is our emergency command center, should we have a problem. And we got more technology probably in this room than they got in the city over there. So it's definitely lacking. When it was built, it was probably there. But, you know, but along with security, I don't mean just like locks on the doors and stuff, but you know, what do we need to do to improve the safety in the building? And the generator, I didn't know just City Hall didn't have a generator, emergency generator. And, you know, we haven't had any nasty storms for a while, knock on wood. But, you know, this is the one place that people are gonna call. They always do.
Yep.
I mean, for everything, even though it's not city related, they call City Hall. So, we need to be able to be up and running. So, and especially the police department. I mean, when it's hitting the fan, we need them up and running, and we need the fire department up and running, so.
Probably more so than the pickle. Well, I think the chicken strips and fries are okay to thaw than having the police department operational during a time of
Fair,
crisis.
yeah.
You're not Irish, are you?
No, I'm not.
I didn't think so. Just a sad thing. Anyway, that's where I'm, defibrillators, I didn't know we didn't have.
No, you don't see
Do
them.
you have one in the clerk's office?
We have one in the
There's one
entryway.
right here.
Yep.
And I know the police officers each have one in their squads.
Yep.
And the fire hall has them, but I don't know if Spirits does or Pickle. or
Public Works.
Does Public Works.
Yeah.
Offhand, I don't know, but
And does
Okay,
Public
we'll
Works
listen.
have something in any of their vehicles that are somewhat portable? I don't know.
thank you.
The only other thing that I've always had in the back of my mind that I would have loved to see the city of Nisswa have is their own power generation, specifically to help offset the cost of electricity that we have for operating all of our public facilities here, from treatment facility to the pump stations to this building and all the other buildings. Outside of prospects of having solar panels be put on some specific buildings where it's aesthetically pleasing, perhaps feasibility of having a smaller array of panels to be able to power, say, the water treatment facility. Downside of that is I know how much land it takes to be able to have a certain amount of megawatt generation. Even just for one, it can require 10 acres of land.
Wow, okay.
We don't have that. So that's why I've kind of stumbled with it, and I have thought about it pretty hard. I'm not willing to propose something right now, but definitely want to bring it up as if it's potentially something that we could do to help offset the cost of even a couple stoplights to have that money be able to be spent elsewhere. So
Well, wind power doesn't take that much land.
wind power doesn't, but it sure is more of an eyesore. That is for sure.
But it's
And they're loud.
something that people look, oh, look, that's this one. It's got a. Well,
That's true. Mm,
Yeah.
no.
Paint them green, we can try. So, thanks, Jesse.
Yep.
Mark, anything?
Well, just for me, as I always look at security is very important to make sure that everybody feels safe here. And that's the number one for me. And then also the worker retention incentives. I think that's a one-time thing that should be considered as well, with all the stress that's been going on with the pandemic as well.
Great. I'm going to circle back to Don. Anything aside from a library on the list that you would like?
Well, I go back to the citywide sound system.
Sure.
It could be very useful if you have lost child or an emergency or storm moving in that you want
Okay.
people to know about. I don't think that the city should pay the whole freight. But sound system would be nice.
I do plan to talk about that with people at the town hall too.
Mhm.
I'd like to see, you know, businesses would be willing to sponsor a speaker type thing, or, you know, hey, you know, I mean, whatever it might be, just to help offset the cost, the initial startup cost.
Well, it's kind of a Wi-Fi system, so you don't have to string any cables or anything
Exactly.
else.
Yeah.
So you buy a speaker for your store.
Well, exactly. The problem is we don't know how much the speakers cost
Well,
because we don't have the chips.
It's only money.
Wonderful. This is a great list. I think it helps to narrow down what we have and add a couple things, but definitely workable. And Maggie and I will work to provide more details, costs, figures, things like that. So you have a little more information to work off of when we meet next. And we'll just go from there. At this point, I'm treating this, separate outside of, the budget process. I think that's appropriate. So we're not rushing, to make decisions on anything, but certainly if we can, pick away at something, I think that would be great. There's a lot of worthy projects on here and it'd be nice to check something or two or three off the list. So we'll follow up with that if that works for you. Yes.
One more thing. Have we ever put on for employees financial planning?
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, have we ever offered them the ability to sit down and, help figure out, financial planning, how to budget, how to, not so much that, but, what should I be putting away? I mean, they mentioned deferred comp in the survey. Okay. And if I'm going to match a certain percent or something like that, which is typically how it's done up to a certain point, then, do you understand how it even works? I mean, deferred comp is one thing, but do they want to go with a Roth IRA or something like that? What are the advantages, disadvantages? If they're younger, they may want to go this route. If they're older, they might want to go that route. Have we ever done anything like that? And could, that might be something to throw out to the employees to see if people are interested in hosting something like that. I mean, I personally, I bought Dave Ramsey's book and I've read it and been working on that program. It's a great program. I can figure it out. So, and me and my financial abilities. So if I can figure it out, anybody can figure it out. So, but, maybe something along that line too,
Yeah,
as a plan. An
great
idea.
question.
I don't know what kind of costs would be involved in that.
Sure.
I don't, but
I would anticipate working through the employee retention committee process conversation, establishing that potentially, and just with some other conversations we're having with this, that, having a budget line item for all staff training or resources or opportunities may come from this, nothing large, at least for a while, but just to have something to offer, something like that. That was included in one of the survey questions to sort of, how important would something like that be? And so I would think that would be a great topic for the employee retention committee, should that come to fruition, to say, is that something of value? And do we spend the time and the resources to put that together? I'm definitely supportive of that if that's a priority. But yeah, no, thank you for that. So, great. That is all I had for you tonight. Certainly happy to answer any questions on these topics. Otherwise, we can adjourn.
Mark, question?
No.
I found one somewhat comical, but also valid point that somebody had on question 19 regarding one thing in your job that could be improved or changed. What would it be? Earlier council and commission meetings. I agree. However, I know that all of us work and we all have jobs. So yep.
That's the hardest thing with council meeting is you want to make sure people have time to get home from work, get the kids home, blah, 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 and then they can still make it or whatever. That might be changing with YouTube. I don't know, but
You want to do all your meetings from home?
We could do them at noon.
Yeah.
Noon it is.
If it's catered, I'll be here.
Don, anything?
Not right now.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
Second.
Everybody seconded.
together.
All in favor, aye.
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 Thank you very much, everybody, for coming.